And the reason is because one, I think there's no one in the world like you. And two, I think that every human being is equally valuable to each other. I think you are wildly unique and equal all at the same time, same breath. So which means you need other people to help draw out of what makes you unique.
Welcome to the Raw and Real podcast. Are you dreaming of changing your life through opening a business? Or are you curious what obstacles entrepreneurs had to overcome on their journey? Then you're in the right place. My name is Agnes Billig and I'm your host. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Raw and Real. Today's guest on the show is Garza. He's a keynote speaker and a personal development coach who has over 15 years of experience in identity mapping. This is a process that he developed that helps individuals to find clarity in who they are and gives them the confidence to believe it and the courage to live it out every day. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rocky.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Can you first tell us a little bit about yourself and the way you grew up and some of the experiences that especially shaped you?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'll try to keep it short because I tend to, I don't want the story to go too long for you, but
go ahead.
Yeah, I grew up in Texas. And so I was actually born in Kansas, but I only lived there for like a week. So I don't really claim Kansas. I came back, moved back to the Dallas area in Texas. I've lived in the Dallas area my whole life. I moved around Texas quite a bit, but always kind of in the Dallas area. I moved a bunch growing up. And so my parents got divorced when I was young. My parents got divorced right when I was around 2. I never lived with my dad growing up after that. My dad got remarried when I was 7. He's still married. I have 2 half brothers, but I never lived with them growing up. My mom has been married and divorced a few times. And so we moved a bunch growing up, but really it was for that reason. And so without giving too much detail in cities, I kind of lived in Dallas pre-kindergarten. Kindergarten, I moved about 30 miles north. And then when I started kindergarten, I moved 30 miles west. I moved about 30 miles south to finish kindergarten. Moved about 300 miles south for first and second grade. Moved about 40 miles west for part of third grade. Moved back 300 miles north for the rest of third grade. And then moved about 15 miles at a time for fourth grade, then for fifth grade, then for sixth grade, then back to my grandparents' house in seventh grade. And then I moved in with my grandparents at that point. And so I moved a bunch. Now, for me, I didn't know that wasn't the way things were. I didn't know that's not the way things were supposed to be. I thought everybody did that. I didn't know until I was probably like 11 or 12 that the first day of school didn't mean like the first day out of school. I didn't realize it meant the first day of a school year because for me, it had always been like the first day out of school. And so I think the reason I share that is because I think it's a really significant part of my life. I think my ability, I learned very quickly that if I could outthink you, outtalk you, outwit you, if I could find a way, obviously I didn't have this language when I was 12, but I think then like if I could find a way to disclose a lot to you, if I could tell you a lot about my life without really having to share who I was, it was my kind of way to attempt to keep myself safe in the way that's how I had found to protect myself. And so I think moving around a bunch, I always had a house. I always had food. I always had, my family loved me. My grandparents were awesome. My mom and dad loved me. But I think I always longed to figure out like where I fit, where I belonged. Where was a space for me that I could really jump into that was, I knew that I could land and I knew it was like a secure place. And I think that's something I looked for a really long time. And so, fast forward through school, high school, college, I always say kind of like same song, different verse. Like my life was kind of the same, did the same things the same way, made the same mistakes, tried to figure something out and nothing changed. And we kind of just kept on in the same loop. It wasn't until I was in college that I kind of had like this first, what I describe as like a big moment in my life of going, I kind of had this realization that like, if this is what my life is going to look like, if I continue to live my life, living in the middle of my own world, this is not the way that I want to live my life. And so I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I couldn't continue to like be the central force of everything I was doing and assume that people were going to care for me and love me and that anything meaningful was going to be created. And so I ended up graduating college, thankfully. Went to a place here in Texas called Sky Ranch. It's a summer camp for kids. I was a counselor there in this one summer, and then I went back to work there full-time after that and was on full-time staff there for about 4 years. If the first part of my life was this belief that I have to prove to you why I'm so valuable and important for you to love me, I kind of think the next 5 or 6 years of my life was I kind of pendulum swung the other way. And it kind of became this belief of, if not for that reason, then maybe you'll love me if I can out-sacrifice myself for you. If I can become the ultimate martyr, if I can find a way to give away myself to you, then you'll have to love me because I'm doing so much for you. still under performance. We just called it something else. We just called it sacrifice as opposed to being special, right? Come to find out, neither of those things work. Neither of those things are actually what you're going for. And neither of those things actually allow any freedom for you. And so I ended up leaving Sky Ranch and coming back to Dallas. I was actually a pastor at a church for about 3.5 years. That's when I met my wife. And we got married in the summer of 2009. So it'll be 11 years this year. During that time, we got married. She ended up quitting her job about 6 months later to start a photography business. She did that for about a year. I got offered what I thought was my dream job. I said no to it because I was a jerk at the time. And I was way more interested in you liking me than I was teaching you about God, which is what my role as a pastor was. And so I ended up resigning from that job and saying, I don't know what I want to do, but I know we have this photography business. So we're just going to pursue that and see what happens. Since then, we shot weddings full time for about 5 or 6 years. I started this business about 5.5 years ago, and been doing that since then. My wife has her own interior design company. We've been married about 11 years. We have a 4-year-old little boy and a 2-year-old little girl. And so I tell you all that because, one, I think I'm a pretty firm believer of whatever happens to us between the ages of 6 and 12, in that time frame in our life, like whatever we do to survive. When I say survive, I don't mean life and death unless that's your story, but whatever we do to get by, the truths that we form about ourselves in that time frame are a really accurate picture of how we operate as an adult. Now, they tend to be also the very things that are our greatest strengths, but also the things that we have used or leveraged as a survival mechanism for a large portion of our life. And so I tell you all that about me because I want you to have some insight about who I am. Anything else I share, I want you to kind of know the history of where that comes from.
Yeah.
But also, like I think it's worthwhile for all of us to kind of do the work that's required to kind of look at that part of our life, because I do think it's really telling about who we are as an adult, and I think how we will continue to live in that way. And so, I think since I left Sky Ranch, came to Dallas, I've spent like the last 15 years kind of looking at what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to really have a language to describe who you are as a human being? And then how do we take that language and use that in all the arenas or areas of our life? No pun intended, but my hope is that you show up with one hat on every day, that you have the ability to be you. And as you create that language, ideally, it provides an element of freedom that you have in all areas of your life.
And because you mentioned that it's super important what happens between the age of 6 and 12. And as you mentioned also that you really moved a lot as a kid, and every year you were at a new school. And one of the things that really gives us purpose and meaning is long-lasting relationships. So I'm also really curious how that affected your mental state and your ability to build long-lasting relationships later on, because you just couldn't really do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. That's how it takes a whole lot of work. I really, up until I would say the last probably, let's see, we got married in 2009, 2012. So I'd say the last 8 years. Probably for me, the last 8 years is the only period of my life where I have friends who I've built relationships in the last 8 years that I'm still friends with. Now, meaning that everybody before that, if I called them today, would we pick up where we left off? Sure. But consistent communication with the same person or group of people for an extended period of time hasn't happened until way late in adulthood for me, like 28 and on. I'm 37 now, so I guess 29 and on. Really 29 and on is kind of when that started. And that was because my wife was like, hey, we're going to buy a house and we're going to live in one neighborhood and go to one church and have a separate group of friends. And we're not moving. We're going to stay here. And it was really scary for me. It was really hard because I'd always found a sense of freedom that if I wanted to leave or move because you hurt me or because I thought something was going to happen, I liked having that option because that's how I had survived. And so, it's a really difficult thing at 29 as an adult, to go, hey, I'm not very good at making friends. Well, I'm great at making friends. I'm not very good at keeping friends.
Yeah.
And the ability to maintain consistent commitment and relationship is definitely something. Now, it's something I've longed for my whole life, but definitely something I had to spend a lot of effort and energy working on.
Yeah, I believe that. And that's really the thing. I think what is really scary is when you move all the time and then like a couple of years later, you look back and then you realize, oh my God, all of the people are changing constantly in my life and I'm kind of missing this harbor in a way.
Yeah. And I think, part of that is, I think for all of us, not just for me or people who have shared experience like me, but I think even folks who grew up in the same house their whole life, in order for us to be able to build relationships that are valuable and meaningful to us, I think it requires an element of ourselves that we're willing to say, am I willing to expose, or the vulnerable is the sexier word to use, but really like, am I willing to expose parts of myself to people that they may or may not like? And I still want to be willing to do that in hopes that they're going to stick with me, stay with me, and still love me for who I am, even if I don't meet an expectation that I think I'm supposed to meet.
And as you mentioned, that in the beginning you were just meeting a lot of people and you were disclosing a lot of information, which can be, mistaken with vulnerability, because some people just like have then the feeling, oh, this person is just sharing so much, but they don't see like that it's a mask, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So when was for you the moment that you started being vulnerable, and how did you manage to make the switch?
Yeah. So I don't think that it was a switch per se, if we use that as a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that are technical in any way, or you like it, a switch is off and on. It was probably more like a slider, like a slow fade in. So that way, sometimes you can pull the slider down if you need to, or you can push back up a little bit more if you want. But
Yeah.
I think for me, the moment for me where I realized it was necessary, I was at Sky Ranch. I was living there, or I was working there. I'd actually been dating a girl for a couple of years. We got engaged. We were engaged for about 6 months. And she called me one day and said, something to tell you. I said, okay, great. What is it? And she said, my mom told me that if I didn't call you and tell you that I was sleeping with somebody else, then she wasn't going to put a deposit down on our wedding venue. And I said, okay. But now that I know, she'll put the deposit down. And she was like, oh, yeah, right. I was like, okay, great. Well, you tell your
Just
mom I
like
said
on the
thank you.
side. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, tell your mom I said thank you and don't ever call me again. And I think for me, if I had to pick a moment where there was at least a realization that the slider had been turned all the way down, if not even on mute, to some degree, if we're going to use that metaphor, I think it was probably that moment in my life. It was like, hey, I have been attempting to be something, try something, build something to no avail, because I haven't actually allowed anyone to see or experience me, because I've been so concerned that you're going to go away. And lo and behold, look what happened. And so I think for me, vulnerability became more of a catalyst for growth, a catalyst to build meaning, a catalyst to get into something. It was less about like, oh, it was scary and I don't want to do it because what if you hurt me? It was more like, if I don't start doing this, then the pain is only going to increase. Because for me, even if it's scary, vulnerability is one of the only things I have found that I feel like has actually allowed me to become more free, not to become more restricted.
So do you think that relationship of you ended because she was longing for a deeper connection, and that you were holding back and protecting yourself and not willing to be vulnerable?
No, I think it ended because she was crazy. And also because I think in the very beginning, it was like, it was formed on an idea or ideas we both had about where a relationship was supposed to be. Yet I don't think either of us were actually working on building something that was deep and meaningful in either direction, because I think we were both scared. I think that's part of the reason that actually attracted us to each other, was that she had an eye disease when I met her. And so she would be blind at some point. So I think there was a part of me that's like, I'll rescue her and save her. And she wants to be rescued and saved. And like, there was this weird, like unspoken codependency between the two of us, probably.
Yeah.
To where like I was gonna be the rescuer and she was gonna get rescued, and we were gonna create this wonderful story. And we both got to fulfill a role that allowed us to feel as though we were fulfilled, even if we weren't. And then so I think what happened is I just didn't really know a difference, and or was too afraid to be the person that walked, because I had experienced that a lot. So I didn't want to be that guy. And I think that she had got caught up in something that she realized she was longing for, to go find someplace, found it in a way that she didn't necessarily want. And then when she did, at that point, it was too late. And so I think it was a large amount of unhealthiness on both of our parts, that when you put those things together, sometimes you feel like it's making the perfect mixture, like, oh, this is what we need for each other. But actually, codependency is not synonymous with healthy relationship. So
yeah, but well, it still happens all the time. So I'm also curious, so when did it become for you so important to define who you really are? Because that's also something that's changing throughout your life multiple times.
Yeah, I think I have consistently learned that if I am not willing to do the work to understand myself and define who I am, then it doesn't matter how much I long to fit in someplace, I'm never going to fit in, because I'm inevitably just going to do what you want me to do. I'm never going to actually become and allow myself to be who I am. And so I think I can look back in like multiple experiences in my life and go, how many times did I attempt to fit in someplace or be someplace or do something And it was all built on, like, it was all predicated on me attempting to be what you wanted me to be. It was never built on me being unapologetic about who I was and my willingness to show up, knowing that that was good enough, valuable enough, and that it carried weight. And I think I came to a place, like, you get to a place, ideally, we all get to a place at some point in our life, whether it's when we're 18 or 28 or 38 or 58. And I've worked with folks in every demographic. So it's all those ages, I can promise you. That we have to be willing to look in the mirror and go, am I willing to stand unapologetically in who I am with a deep belief and understanding and language about myself, so that no matter where I go, I'm not playing ping pong with my life going like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Will I fit in here? I had the ability to go, no, I know I belong here because I know who I am. And there's a sense of security and consistency. And I think for me, like, to go back to our metaphor, like, there's a consistent level that it allows me to show up and know that I can be me. And if you don't like it, it's okay. It's not okay for me to be a jerk to you. It's not okay for me to be mean to you, but it's okay for me to be me with a positive intent to show up consistently for who I am. And if that's not someone that you want to be around, that is okay. But I spent a long time trying to be what you wanted me to be, as opposed to being willing to show up for who I was.
And do you think that you really need to sit down for yourself and really strongly think about it? Otherwise, you're just too influenced by the people around you?
100%. And I don't think that any of us have the ability to fully know, see, and understand who we are when we just talk to ourselves. I don't think you can do that by yourself. That's not a pitch for you to hire me. I'm saying I don't care where you are in the world. If you don't have the ability to sit in a room by yourself and only talk to yourself and tell yourself the whole truth.
And for someone that wants to find out who they are, what are the steps that they need to take in order to do that, or at least get close to there?
Yeah, first, I think you need to find somebody that you trust and somebody that you respect. It doesn't have to be a professional coach per se. It doesn't have to be a therapist. I mean, I think those are all really good options. It can be a really good friend. If you feel like you have a really good friend in your life that you trust, like you trust what they say and you respect them in the sense that you know they have your best interest in mind. They're not just going to tell you what you want to hear to make you feel good. That's not the friend I'm talking about here. Those are okay friends to have sometimes. That's not the friend I'm talking about. You need to find somebody you trust and somebody you respect. And I think you need to be willing to put in the work to, one, figure out what are the questions that you need to be asking about who you are. And then two, is that a kind of person that has the ability to help begin to build a language around what that is? I think that's the number one thing that I find in my work, both personally and professionally. It's not that I think you don't know who you are. It's I think that you don't have the language. You're illiterate to your ability to describe it, right? Like, that's a part of what my job is I don't tell you who you are. I'm not a magician. I'm not a guru. I can't like rub a crystal ball and be like, oh, I now see who you are. We couldn't see. That's ridiculous. Anybody who tells you that, don't hire them. Okay. That's not true. But I do think I have the ability to draw out of you what already is true about you that you are unwilling to look at yourself. And then I think if you can have someone in your life to help draw that out of you, then I think what happens is not only do you believe it because it was your words, it's not my words, it's your words, but you put in the consistent work to see, know, and understand what that is. And so step one is come to the realization you're never going to really know who you are by yourself. It's impossible, because I don't think we were made or designed as human beings to live in isolation by ourselves. I think we were made for community. I think we were made for people. And the reason is because I think there's no one in the world like you. And two, I think that every human being is equally valuable to each other. I think you are wildly unique and equal all at the same time, same breath. So which means you need other people to help draw out of what makes you unique. Other people need you to do that for them as well. But you got to have a language. You got to have something to be able to describe what that is, so that you can have the chance or opportunity to be able to engage others in a way where you can stand unapologetically in who you are.
And because you mentioned that you need to start asking yourself questions. So what do you think are the right questions to ask?
I think the first question you need to ask yourself is, what do I think about most? As a human being, what do I think? What do you think about? That's my question to you. What do you think about most? Where do you spend the majority of your brain power? You can be our example.
Me.
What do you think about most? Yeah.
I think a lot about personal development, about where I want to go in the future, and the path that's going to get me there.
Okay. Tell me about that.
So what I'm really interested in is human connection and developing human connection, and the factors that you need in order to have that, and also like figuring out the barriers, the internal barriers that someone has, and helping them over that.
Mm. And in that pursuit and the hope of that, what's the goal for you?
I think for me, I just know what it's like when certain things are holding you back, like a fear, and you're not living what you want to because of these kind of fears. And it's it's an amazing feeling if you get over that.
Yeah.
Because you have the feeling of growth. And that's what really makes us feel alive.
So then could we say, if we take all those answers and we keep going, would we say the thing that you think about most is being alive? Like being fully alive?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. So again, and it's not that, and every answer you gave is good and true and correct. The reason I asked that question, the reason I think it's invaluable for us to ask ourselves and ask each other that question is because we know what it is that we think about. But if we can say, tell me, my favorite phrase in the world is tell me about that. Because it's disarming, it's easy. And basically it's my way to be like, yeah, I don't believe you. Go a little bit deeper. But when you don't have to say that. You can just say, tell me about that, right? So we said, what do you think about most? You said personal development. I said, okay, tell me about that. What do you think about most? And you said, well, really human connection, like understanding how we connect. Okay, great. Tell me about that. No, like it's like, what is keeping us from having the ability to be connected? Because when we know what our fear and insecurity is, when we can identify doubt in our life and we can overcome it, then we can see that there's growth. And when you're growing, that's how you know you're alive. Oh, okay. Okay. So we think about most is what is required in our life for us to consistently be growing, because growth is a mechanism that allows us to recognize that we are alive.
That's correct. That's accurate.
So our ability to ask that question first and goes, okay, so your ability to know what you think about most is you gave yourself a bunch of language to begin to do some self-development or some personal development, or to be able to go, okay, how do I begin to discover who I really am? You are somebody who longs for deep connection. You are somebody who longs to know that whatever has been occurred in the past can be removed. We can overcome, to give us the ability to see somebody for who they are right now. And our ability to see them right now gives us the chance and enough grace to go, hey, you are worthy and valuable to build a connection with. And when there is human connection, there is no longer isolation. And when we are void of isolation, that means we are alive, it is good, and we can move forward in the place that we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think as we work on giving ourselves that language, as we work on that, those are ways. Personal development is true. That's great. But I think that doesn't talk about you at all. That doesn't talk about your ability at all. It doesn't talk about your uniqueness at all. But growth and being alive and belonging and human connection, those words are so much richer as they describe you and give a language and make you literate in your ability to communicate about yourself. You're not just interested in personal development. You're interested in what is really required, human to human, soul to soul, that really makes us alive.
So how do my characteristics come into play now?
So now that we have that we're going to use that as kind of like our overarching view of what, in a sense of, to be able to say, okay, what language do I have about what I think about? And typically what I think about now, we would go, next question is, I would say, there's 4 questions I like always ask people. So 1, what do you think about most? You answered that. The second question is like, what 3 things in life do you fear losing most? And the reason I typically ask people about their fears is because typically what we think about most is directly related to our fears. So you may not say this, I'm totally putting words in your mouth, but just to go for the sake of the exercise, if we know what you think about most is development, connection, belonging, and having the ability to overcome fear and insecurity, right? Then I would say if that's what we think about most, what if that's related to what we fear? What you fear is being isolated, not belonging, not having purpose, not feeling like you have the ability to make a difference, being connected to other people, right? Like those are ways we would say things that we're fearful of.
Yeah.
Our ability to do that, then question 3 is like, if you could do 2 things the rest of your life and be totally satisfied, what would those 2 things be? And the reason I ask people that is because I want you to be able to go to kind of the dream space, right?
Yeah.
Like the hope space. Go, if I could do anything, I would do this, right? And what happens is, not that it's opposite, but when we do that, it allows us to, we put our fears aside just for a second, because I give you permission to go, if you could do anything though, what would you do? Right? And if we have the ability to identify that, then my last question for you would be, okay, then what's one thing in life you really hope to accomplish? That's number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And our ability to assess our thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams gives us the ability to know what we think about is typically related to what we fear. What we fear keeps us from doing what we really hope for. And we never do what we hope for. We never really accomplish what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to ask you to just invert the list. What if what you thought about most was the one thing in life you really hope to accomplish?
Yeah.
I bet you would do more of the two things. If you could do anything in your life, what would it be? I bet you'd do more of those things. And if you did more of those things, you'd be less fearful of losing what you're not going to lose to begin with.
I
If you didn't
think
think so much about those fears, it would change what you think about.
I think it definitely helps a lot to get clarity and where you want to go. But I think because you mentioned also what are the activities you would like to do for the rest of your life, I think sometimes it can be probably hard to make a living out of that.
Right. But here's the difference. And I'm so glad you said that. I didn't ask you what are the two things you want to do the rest of your life as a profession.
Yeah.
You could have said drink wine and travel. Those could be your answers.
Yeah.
And my point is, because if you thought about traveling and drinking wine and that's what you really enjoyed,
Yeah.
I bet you would spend less time worrying about something that's not in your control, and you'd spend more time with people you care about drinking good wine. And if you did that, you would think about your fears less because you would be more fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have to go to work? Sure. Do you still got to make money? Sure. If you want to answer number 3 based on a profession, hey, by all means, if that's how your brain works. But most people don't. Most people don't answer number 3. If I say, if you could do 2 things the rest of your life, be totally satisfied, what would they be? Most people don't list anything to do with their profession.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I want you to give yourself the mental and emotional freedom
Yeah.
to say, what is fulfilling to you?
Mm.
What is valuable to you?
Yeah.
What brings joy to your life?
Mm-hmm.
What allows you to smile? What is a thing that, like, when you think about it, you're like, I just really want to do that some more. Not because we're going to build a life where we do that all day, every day. That's not sustainable for most of us. To your point, I can make a living doing that. Well, I don't know. It's a different question.
Yeah.
But our ability to recognize that typically lends itself to going, okay, but it's typically related to something in our life we really hope to accomplish, which for most of us doesn't have to do with our profession. That's the whole reason for the exercise. You giving a language to who you are should not be a description of your resume.
Yeah, because we're way more than just a resume.
A resume is a very small descriptor of a small portion of your life.
So if I ask you that, how would you define yourself of who you are?
How would I define myself about who I am?
Mm-hmm.
Can you ask me a more specific question?
Well, I think there are many aspects we can talk about who you are. So what are the most favorite aspects about who you are?
Yeah. So if I use my own language in the way that I would help or encourage somebody else to do, I kind of break up who we are, gets broken up into 3 categories. So one we refer to as the why we do. That's our core values. It's why we do things. We say it's the reason, intention, motivation behind everything we choose. A second way would be like to break it up on our strengths. I describe strengths as that's how you do what you do. It's the way your hands and feet get put into action, that how you operate as a human being. And then a word we call identifiers, which is the what it is you actually do. That's like when you're out there in the world, what does that look like? Those are kind of the 3 pieces. And so, like if I use those words, if I use that for myself, if I start with values for me, because that's like, I think that's the most foundational aspect of who we are, the things we value most. I value vulnerability, generosity, fearlessness, experience, and intimacy. Those are my 5 personal core values, the things that for me, one, are the foundation that I build on, but also the filter I have to run everything in my life through. Is it valuable to me? Do I want to do it? Do I want to expend energy there? I don't know. Is it lend itself to vulnerability or fearlessness or intimacy or experience? Like that's the language for that. That's represents me and my soul. That's who I am as a human. And I want to bring that everywhere. When it comes to strengths, like for me, it's the ability to communicate. It's a strength called woo, which means win others over. It's the ability to get people to like you in a really short amount of time.
Yeah.
Things like futuristic, to see like what could be, what might mean, to draw that out in other people. I think I'm always looking like in every scenario, somebody says something, I'm like, well, you said this, but is this what you really meant? Like my brain is never not doing that. Right. And then I think at a 30,000 foot level, if I describe who I am, I'm a challenger, I'm a truth teller, I'm an inspirer. I am somebody who I don't hold a lot of space for like ambiguity or like, well, I wonder if they think that we should. I'm just going to ask you. I just want to know. I'd rather just have the truth, and I want to challenge. I want to push you to see something you can't see. And so I know it's a lot of words. That's a part of our identity mapping process, which is why I use that language, because I think it's fitting. But I mean, if I had to really break it down, like those are ways to describe attributes about who I am. If we want something more tangible, then I'm a husband. I'm a father. I guess I'm a business owner. But that doesn't fall very high on the list, not because it's not important, but I don't think that's not really describing me. I want to show up as Rocky, and then Rocky the human, Rocky the husband, Rocky the father. That's the Rocky that I want to show up to work. I don't want to show up as work Rocky.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. And so, so yeah, I know that was a long thing, but I don't know if that helps you any.
So what do you think is the biggest struggle for people when you talk to them and when you make these exercises for them? The hardest aspect to figuring out who they are?
Doubt.
Doubt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the inability to look at themselves in the mirror and actually believe what they see back is true and is good. I think most of us, and metaphorically, I think most of us, because of doubt, and I use doubt as a kind of an overarching word, fear, obstacle, insecurity, we can put lump a bunch of things in there. Mm-hmm. But I think if we use doubt as the overarching word, doubt tends to be the thing that keeps us from actually seeing what's true when we look in the mirror. Mm-hmm. We see a distorted version of what is because we're living somebody else's story of our life. It's not ours.
Mm-hmm. And because you mentioned we're living somebody else's stories, in the book that you're going to bring out, you wrote that you lived also a large portion of your life believing someone else's story of who you are. And I'm also really curious, when was the first moment for you that you realized, hey, I'm living someone else's story. I want to change that.
Yeah. I think probably the moment that I had the most clarity of that was probably when I stopped working at the church I was at and kind of started as my own business. Not because I was a fake person there, but because I think what I thought I really wanted for my life, in fact, is what somebody else wanted for me. I didn't want to actually be a pastor at a church. I didn't actually want to be a teaching, preaching pastor at a church. I didn't want to get up in front of the same group of people every Sunday and be an expert at the Bible and help you understand the Bible. That's not my heart. I love people. I love being in front of people. I love talking to people. I love helping draw things out of you. That was not the avenue or the conduit that I believed I was most gifted in doing that in. And I think in that context, it really allowed me to go, is that a bad thing? No, it's a beautiful thing. It's just not my thing. It's just not for me, where I think I have the ability to like really hone in on something that I believe in. And so I would say for me, that's probably the first, probably real tangible moment where I was like, I got offered what I thought was my dream job and it does not sound very fun. Why? That seems weird. If I thought this is what I wanted. And then to go, actually, it's not what I wanted at all.
And who was the influence that pushed you to take that job, or that planted that seed in your brain that was the right thing?
I mean, I think the seed, if we could remove the job from it and just go, where did the seed come from? I had spent my whole life trying to make everybody happy because that seemed to be the only thing that was going to keep you from walking away. I mean, I couldn't make my dad happy enough because he left. Couldn't make my mom happy enough because she chose marriages or jobs. I couldn't make my friends happy enough because I kept leaving schools. I couldn't make girlfriends happy. Right? I could fill in the gap where like the narrative in my mind that I had been telling myself, the story I'd been telling myself was, you're going to have to do what they want you to do if you want to be happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So was there something specific that happened that you realized, oh my God, that's not what I want to be? Because you were working that job for like 3 years. So that must have.
Yeah. I mean, I think the realization was, if I say yes to this is the kind of career you have for a really long time. And I'm making a commitment, not just to me, but at that point, the church was like 4,000 people. I'm making a commitment to 4,000 people that this is who I am and who I'm going to be. And I'm going to show up for you like this over and over and over. And that seemed really overwhelming. It seemed like, you know what? No, thank you. I don't think I can be that person you need me to be anymore. I think I just needed to figure out who I am so I can be that person.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can get on a stage now and I have 2 or 3 messages that I would give, and I can give that all day, every day. No inhibition. I have no reservation. I believe in my soul what I'm saying is good and valuable for you, regardless of where you are. And I don't need you to clap at the end for me to feel like I did my job.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a phrase that's come up quite a bit lately, and it's a little bit cheesy. So if it's cheesy, if you're listening to this and it's cheesy, then please just forgive me. But I think the moment and where this phrase came from is because of this moment in my life. But I was giving up my purpose for a pat and a praise. Mm-hmm. Like I was giving up my purpose to be patted on the back and for someone to go, hey, you're doing a great job up there. You're looking really great. Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I was neglecting the thing I was made for because I just wanted you to tell me I was good.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of us get caught in a cycle, is we found something that somebody else goes, oh, you're good at that.
Yeah.
Or the flip side of that, we get caught in a cycle where we've been told our whole life, you're not good at this. When in fact, maybe you are. My wife is great in front of people. She's a great speaker. She's great on a panel. She's great asking questions. And she's told herself her whole life she's a terrible speaker. Why? Because somebody at one point said, hey, you're not that good at that. You're an artist. You're not a speaker. Don't do the speaking thing. Because
And
the story she told herself. My husband's a speaker. He does that. I don't do that. I don't want to do that. That's dumb. Come to find out she's pretty good at it.
And how did you manage to overcome that mentally and just change your perception and be like, okay, I'm going to live my own purpose?
I mean, I think for me, I just had enough moments to go, man, I've lived a lot of years for somebody else. I lived a lot of years trying to make somebody else happy, and none of it has worked. My dad didn't come back. My mom didn't choose me. The career didn't work out. The marriage didn't, the engagement didn't work out. Scholarship didn't happen. I mean, we can go down the list of everything I thought was like a check mark and hang it up on the wall and look how awesome it is. And every single one of them was like, not working out for you, buddy.
Yeah.
And it's not working out for me because I'm attempting to make somebody else happy. It's not working out for me because I'm trying to be what you need me to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying to be selfish. I'm not saying to be a narcissist. I'm not saying my marriage will not work if every day I walk in the house and I'm like, screw you, babe. I'm doing what I want. That's not understanding who you are is not a neglect of people.
Yeah.
Understanding who you are is allowing yourself to show up as yourself and trust that that's good enough. My wife needs me to be me. She married me.
And how do you think can we best develop that trust? Because you also said that that doubt is a big topic that's holding people back.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I heard you ask me two questions. One, how do we develop trust? And then two, if doubt is a big issue, what do we do about doubt? So for me, and we talk about this, we have a course on our platform. We also, the book, Kill Doubt, Build Conviction, that's coming out. It's the whole book is dedicated to this single point is, I think there's two stories at play our whole life. There's stories that people tell us about us and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think those two narratives are constantly at play. We cannot control the stories that people tell us about us. I can't change what anyone says about me, but I can definitely change what I say to myself about myself. But that means in the space in between that, I have to do the work to go, what is true and what is not, what is real and what is not, what matters and what doesn't. And so how do we begin to overcome that doubt? Well, we have to take enough time to do the work to go, can I actually figure out what story is true? Can I actually look at what matters? Can I actually determine, is that actually who I am? Or does people just tell me that my whole life and I believed it?
And
is that actually who I am? Is that actually who I am? Or have I just been telling myself that my whole life and it's not actually true?
And because you say what people say around us, so how do you best analyze what part of it to believe and to accept and what part not to?
Well, one, I always tell folks, I think anything that you replay in your mind that someone has told you about you and that uses the word so, S-O, or to, T-O-O, is typically a sign that that's not your words. That's somebody else's depiction of you. Hey, Rocky, you're too emotional. You're too intense. All that language is someone reflecting back to you the way they have experienced you, not reflecting back to you who you are. Right? Someone saying, Rocky, you're too intense. No, I'm not. I'm just intense. You're not intense enough. But your way to tell me that, you're never going to say, hey, that guy's really intense and I can't handle it. You're just going to tell me I'm too intense. Right? So same line, but which story is true? Well, what if the story is true, but what if it's good? What if the story that's true is meaningful? What if the story that's true is beautiful? What if it doesn't have to be twisted in the way that says I'm too intense? What if the story is I'm just intense and it's okay? What if I'm intense because I long for intimacy, not because I'm trying to rustle your feathers? And so I think we have to do the work to go, okay, what is a story that I'm being told to me about me? And then do I have the ability to pull out of that what is actually true?
Yeah.
Going to require work. It's not a one and done thing. Like for me, that's the beauty of there's going to be the beauty of the book. You can go through it 4 or 5 or 6 times. Go through it every 6 months if you need to.
Yeah.
It's one part book, one part guide, one part framework, one part my story. Like I want you to be able to kind of do that because I think it's necessary.
Yeah. And how have your family and your friends also reacted to your change when you started living your own story?
Yeah, I think at first, my friends, I would say, have kind of always known me as this because, again, the last 8 years, I've kind of always been this person. There's definitely change and transformation, but the friends I have right now that I know and I'm still friends with, like this is the only guy I've ever known. Now, to say I haven't changed in 8 years, that's ludicrous. I absolutely have. I think I hope they would say that they know what they're going to get. and that I'm fairly unapologetic, or at least attempt to be, about who I am and the role that I want to play in their life. I think from a family perspective, that's a little bit different.
Hmm.
I think you, as you change, and really, I'm going to use a different word. I don't want to use the word change. I think as we transform, if those around us are transforming alongside us, not necessarily with us, but alongside us, the transition feels really smooth. We're all growing together. To your point, if there's a deep human connection and we're moving collectively in that, then we are overcoming and we're growing, we're living together. I think where the issue that a lot of us are going to have is that we're going to grow at a rate that others in our life are not growing at.
Yeah.
And that's going to require, and I think what that elicits is, as the separation gets larger, what required on our end is then it requires more boundaries. Is that as I continue to grow, you can't just hop the fence every time that you want to come over here and see this or know that, like, that's not how it's going to work. And so I think with more growth, if we grow together, I think it's a really beautiful process. I think if one of us is growing at a different rate or pace than somebody else, then it's probably going to elicit some boundary to know where they land and where we land.
And because you mentioned also the speed of growth, so I'm curious, how was it, for example, how did that influence your relationship with your dad? Because you said that you always lived with your mom and then your dad got remarried. So I can imagine that wasn't always easy, the relationship you had with him.
Yeah, I think it definitely was not always easy. There was a moment when I was 21 or 22, I don't remember how old I was, somewhere in there, where I hadn't talked to my dad in a couple of years, and I called him one day and said, "Hey, I was in college, and he had never been to my college to see where I was at." And so I called him one day and just said, "Hey," like, it was like a Thursday. I was like, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing this weekend, but like, I'd love for you to come hang out with me for the weekend." Fully expecting him to say no. Like, literally the only reason I asked him is so that he would say no, so I could be like, "Well, done with you. See ya." And yeah, I called him and said, "I'd love for you to come down this weekend if you want to." And he said, "Okay, great. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon." And I was like, "Oh no, you're supposed to say no. I don't know what if you really come, I don't know what's supposed to happen." And I think for me, that was kind of a marker. So that was 16 years ago ish, 16 years ago. And I think for me, that really was a significant marker in our relationship at that point, because I just told him, I said, "Hey, listen, I didn't like you and I don't really like you right now, but I love you. And I don't need you to be my father. I'm just asking you to be my friend. But I believe that there's a path." The words I used with him, I said, "I believe that God has a path for me in my life. And I don't want to walk down that path and look back and you're not there because I didn't invite you to join me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking you, don't have to play a significant role in my life. I just want you to be with me. I just want you to be my friend. I just want to go down this path. And I don't want you to not be there because I didn't invite you." And I think that simple invitation was really all we need. And the last 15 years have been a lot of work and a lot of hard conversations and a lot of disappointment on both of our ends, I'm sure. But it has I think the invitation to join me has led itself to us to be able to consistently reconcile and I think consistently grow closer in our relationship with each other since then.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think was really like a hard time for you also as an entrepreneur? And how has your life changed for the better because you went through it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think one thing as an entrepreneur, for everybody, and kind of relating everything we've been talking about and how does that translate over to owning your own business. Especially as an entrepreneur, when I say entrepreneur, I'm not talking about if you own a company of 100 people. I'm saying if it's like three of you or less, right? Really the only marker that anybody has to set themselves apart or be different is them. Like, are you really doing any sort of like digital marketing that nobody else in the world is doing? And so we're hiring. Come on, your API is the same, your widgets is the same, your bots the same, your drip campaign's the same, your funnel's the same. It's all the same. Okay. What is different though is, why do I want to work with you as opposed to somebody else? Right? And there's a lot of personal development coaches out there. There's a lot of people with experience, a lot of people with programs, a lot of people with, and so why do people potentially want to work with me and not anybody else? It's not because I have really fancy booklets or because our Zoom calls are in HD or because we have, all that, nobody cares. It's because people want to be able to look across at me either in person or on a screen and go, I trust that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I like that guy. Like there's something about him that I resonate deeply with, that I think he'll be able to see something in me that maybe nobody else can. And so I think as all the things we've been talking about, as it translates, like that's been something that I've had to learn consistently, be reminded of over and over and over, that like even in the midst of where we are now, in the midst of a global pandemic, if you will, is that I don't need to change my message so that you'll hire me. As if anything, I need to double down on my message and say, this is who I am and this is the road I'm going to maintain. And if right now your company is not in the market for a guy like me, it's okay. because I believe there are millions of individuals who are in the market for a guy like me. And so if coronavirus, it was the corporate world, maybe post-coronavirus, it's the individuals. Like maybe I got to come back and double down, but I don't want to change my message because of that. And so I think that's one of the most difficult things as an entrepreneur is going, how do you consistently grow and change and transform and stay up to date and, without really jeopardizing who you are and being able to stick to that. And so I think do the work required to understand who you are, find that language, really hone in that language, that message. And then no matter what variations change, right? Like I have avoided being a coach for a really long time. I've always done coaching, but I've avoided calling myself that. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to own it because it's who I am. It's what I do. I provide coaching in group and one-on-one format. I'd love to have you join me. And if it's something you're interested in, let's do it.
And because you also mentioned the pandemic and everything is changing. So what are the inner demons that you're fighting at the moment?
Yeah, that it's not going to work. That it's all going to fall apart. And that somebody at some point, someone's going to send an email, be like, hey, shut it down, bro. Nobody needs that. If you can't help me scale my business or go 10X, I don't want to work. What you're saying is not important enough to pay money for.
And you're already doing this for years and years. So how come that you still have that fear that it's not going to work? Because from the outside perspective, I wouldn't think that about you.
Because I'm a human being. And because no matter how much clarity, no matter how much precision, no matter how much work I believe that it's done, I believe we are human beings, and there is not a growth. I don't think there's a growth trajectory that we're going to jump on to go, this is how I'm going to overcome fear and it's never going to come in my life again. If anybody's telling you that, don't buy that. I don't think that's true. I think it's consistent. Do I have more tools now that fear doesn't last for a month or a week? Maybe it only lasts for a day, or maybe it only lasts for an hour. Yeah, absolutely. But is the fear still there? Yes. Am I pumped about the fact that the book is available for pre-order? Yeah. Am I also feared that literally no one's going to buy it and I just have a fancy page on my site? Yes. But I think both of those things can live together, right? Like that's to me, that's the beauty. To me, that's where there's a lot of power, is that those things have the ability to live together. And so am I going to let that win? No, it will not win. It will not win. We will promote it. We will publish it. We will ask people to share it. We will get it printed. It will get shipped to you. Somebody out there is going to get a copy of the book. I might send them for free. Somebody's getting one, right?
Yeah, thanks. I really love that answer, especially the we are all human aspect, because I think, we often kind of forget that, especially through social media and all of the perception that you get.
Yeah, people, especially on social. I mean, and I'm guilty of it as well. I think we all are. Like nobody posts all their posts like, hey man, here's the 3 leads I lost today because they didn't hire me. Happy Monday. See you guys tomorrow. I mean, nobody puts that in their story, right? They just put, hey, here, just sign it. They just go, got a new contract, got a new lead, 7 new clients. Okay, great. How many prospects have they sent out that just didn't need an email back? They didn't share that. There's no like highlight reel on Insta stories that were like, email sent, never returned. Nobody has that.
Yeah, that would be something new. That would be really fun.
Yeah.
So do you still have a last key takeaway, a personal insight that you would like to share that helped you grow?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it would be like, be willing to ask yourself every day, what do I need? Who can I ask to help me with that need? And then I think, and then if and when it's appropriate, like where can I meet the need of somebody else? I think if every day we were willing to assess in ourselves, where am I at? How do I feel? What do I need? And then what can I put into action to make sure I'm carrying and serving somebody else? I think the world will be a lot better place. And I think even in your business, no matter what your business is, I think you would find yourself in a position that you would be less stressed about money and clients, because you'd be more inclined to understand where you are, to ask for help, and then to make sure you're serving the people that you've already been given. And
how can people contact you?
Yeah, so you can find me at rockygarza.com. That's ROCKYGARZ as in zebra, A.com. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's just all Rocky Garza. There's not a lot of us out there, so it's fairly easy to find. Look for the hat, the glasses, or the eyebrows. One of those 3, you'll be able to find me. I'm out there. And yeah, you can check it out. The book, Killed Out, Build Convictions, available for pre-order now. So go and grab that. We'd love for you to do that. And then also, if you want to, we have a project called the Daily Rock. And so it is a text message that we send out Monday through Friday every morning as a way to challenge, encourage, or motivate you in some kind. And all you got to do, it's free to join. All you got to do is just send us a text message that says, I want to join, to the number is 469-649-8441. So shoot us a text, any number, anywhere, and just say, hey, I want to join. And then we'll get you set up on that.
Yeah, and please everyone, +1 as a code for the US.
Yep, there you go. Thank you for that.
And thank you so much for sharing today overall. And for everyone who's watching or listening, if you could find any value in this conversation today or had any insights that really helped you or resonated with you, please make sure to share it with your friends on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, so we can see what your favorite takeaways were.